I've been saying that there are reasons that I will make sure that I don't become a famous celebrity. Scientist, probably, not singer, and or badminton player. And the reason for that is, again, it's harmful to the brain. It's harmful to the ego. My ego is a lot more protected than yours are. That's something that I would have to start vlogs to explain. And there's also strategies already in place that I have related to what would happen if my voice would, be accepted more and more in the messages I have to say, and I'd be heard more and known more on the internet or even invited places. There's already strategies in place that I know I could use to not become a celebrity in the same sense as others, right? For example, if my YouTube ever got a lot of comments, and the comments would show that people don't get what I'm trying to say, or there's bullying happening in my comments, I've already mentioned in other vlogs where I criticize, let's say, Joe Rogan or Jordan B. Peterson, that there'd be strategies to end this and counteract this, so that, whatever I become famous for is the right things in the right way for the right reasons, and definitely won't have anything to do with the monetary paradigm raising, the balance of my bank account. But here I'm watching this here, and this social scientist, he's talking about little aspects of my theory that I've been talking about. And of course he doesn't have the big picture, but he's the one being invited on CNN right now, okay?
Trying to get in and so on. When you speak to fans themselves, you get a much more mixed picture of this. I mean, it's quite clear from people within the industry, so people who work in the music industry say this has been a trend for 2 years. Fans themselves sometimes describe not noticing any changes in audience behaviour, or they say that it was slightly different when they reopened in 2021, and now it's gone back to normal. So it actually depends who you talk to whether or not this is actually a trend.
And how can this type of behavior be stopped? I mean, what are the...
So by the way, to find out if it is a trend or not, is don't just interview people and ask them, is do measurements. And again, it would take time. It would take specifically designed research models, and of course it would have to start with the premise that you're not just measuring for one thing, bad behaviors, but you're measuring for what is behind them, what is happening in the brain, what is the motivation, what is the ability for the person to explain, let's say after they throw something, what caused them to do that, what is causing people's shift of ideologies, worldviews, and just general brain programming to be more towards the ego-centered, and for them to have less of an ability, even if you explain it to them and you say this is how you get your job back, for example, is to be able to reference the outside world, and they no longer can do that. Now, of course, you can't measure, for the entire theory I'm talking about, with just musical events, but you have to make it more about good or bad behaviors, for example.
How does that play?
Well, in terms of explanations, one of the explanations is that people have different expectations now, or at least some people do. They are a bit more individualized. They don't have a sense of being part of a larger group or a collectivity, and they're just interested in their own personal gratification.
By the way, I'd gone only to this time, 2:44 actually, before I started filming this vlog. So I don't know what's going to be said after this. But yes, when people have their own expectations that are totally ego-centric, that means, everybody else's motivation for being there it is not only not important, it's not even something that comes to mind to these people. And when you explain it to them, people that suffer from more advanced versions of HSD and therefore devolve their ability to reference the outside world or to see themselves in their lives in social situations, is they're unable to kind of grasp that, all of them paid the same price or more, and all of them are fans to somewhat the same levels and want to get a different experience. And yet, and of course, this is not just music concerts. This is about enjoying an outdoor setting, a park, nature, camping. Like, I go to campsites the last few years, and I tell you, less and less people are able to acknowledge the existence of others around them that aren't part of their group of, drinkers and smokers, but that the others are actually there to get away from their behaviors and to just have a natural world experience. And they can't get that. And they will attack you as their right to be there while their kids are around the campground and almost getting hit by, via cars, cycling everywhere, and they're bad parents. But if you call them on that too, you're about to be beat up. So again, the devolution of the human species is a lot more than what he's talking about, and I'm not going to waste my time trying to contact him, but my point here is that, this guy's touching on some of the points of my own Grand-Unification theory.
I haven't seen any direct tests of this explanation or other explanations, but what we have noticed from our own research is that these incidents are much less likely to occur at those smaller events where fans say there was a small, intimate crowd where everybody was there for the same reason.
Like greedy artists are going to want to start doing small concerts to keep themselves safe. Come on. You could tell by the way they respond to the incident that they're children with no life skills. It's easy to see this. Like, for example, when the water was thrown at the lady at the beginning of this video, and she threw a microphone right away, do you really think I, as an Homo sapien, would do this? And also, what if she says, I'm stopping the concert because of this guy? Do you know that's pretty close to a death sentence? She just is an accessory to murder because that guy will probably get killed that day, upsetting a large crowd of people. There's going to be somebody in there that will want to kill him and will do it. And that's not something that the artist is able to reference either, right? The outside world, the consequences of her actions. She's just responding emotionally, and probably in a more dysfunctional way than the person that just threw what could have been water, and it could have been a stupid impulsive thought to refresh her because it's hot, right? That person didn't want to stop the concert and get murdered. Except that, you guys kind of don't think very much about consequences of actions on yourselves or even others.
As opposed to the large stadium events with large stars. I mean, it's noticeable that the events you talked about and the events that have been in the news involve very famous stars where there might be an element of people trying to raise their own social media profile. And it's important to point out, too, it is only a small minority of people doing this. It's not large numbers of people.
Yeah, but still, I mean, it's quite dangerous. I mean, some of the things are outright bizarre. I believe performer Pink had a bag of somebody's mother's ashes thrown at her. I mean, it's quite disturbing. If you're a performer, what do you do?
I think I agree with you. There is a safety element as well as an element of affecting people's enjoyment. In terms of solutions, I'd say two things. I mean, the fact that you seem to get, you're more likely to get these at certain kinds of events means that perhaps venues and artists can learn from those events where they're happening less often. We know that some festivals work very hard to create a sense of community amongst fans and audiences.
Okay, that's a good point because the artist and their team are not trained in this. But if the artist insists on a big venue with a lot of money and maximizing profits and not questioning contracts, because then you'd have to hire a lawyer and say, hey, I didn't like getting hit last time. I'm going to do smaller. I've got to get out of this contract. Here's a doctor's note. I'm worried about big venues. Is they can hire, let's say, a social psychologist if the training is specific to this, and it might not even be somebody with a PhD in psychology that would have the right skill sets for this, but they'd be working the crowd, and even gauging it, that they might even have an agreement with the artist to take a break at this point, and the person comes in with a microphone and does some exercises and some talking to build this community thing. And it's sad, but again, I've been saying I have to be everybody's teacher, and they're older than me, and everybody's babysitter, and they're older than me, because we're devolving so fast at this point that there's nobody that I know that had human parents. So what do you expect that new generation to be like? It's accelerating the devolution of your species. But, it's not just doing less of them, but there's also, security should say very clearly, when people agree to buy a ticket online, let's say, that bags will be checked, and there's no reason to bring anything other than, a bottle of water. And even like they could be, the stage is backed up more. I'm sorry, the artists don't necessarily have to go walk among the crowd and sell more expensive tickets closer to the stage. There's a lot of things, like even bringing phones. I mean, like maybe you can bring a phone, but, if you want to have a ticket that is that close, even the phone is a dangerous thing to be thrown. So, don't be, expecting to not have your pockets and purses and bags checked if you're going to be within the first 10 meters of the stage
beforehand. And maybe venues could try and do a bit more to create that sense of community rather than simply position people as individual consumers. The other thing I'd suggest is, one factor that everybody seems to agree is relevant is that the industry lost a lot of skilled people when live events closed down in 2020. Those skilled people didn't come back. I'm talking about...
Okay, but it's not just losing skilled people. It's about the inability to hire skilled people because they don't exist. And even the ones they lost would have quickly devolved. I'm telling you, during this COVID thing, even the ones that were the best in, working with people, like most industries, is they weren't as good after, and they felt justified to vent in some way with clientele. That's not good for business. It's the worst time in history to start any kind of business that is, interacting with the public. It really is.
Security people who have the diplomatic skills to diffuse situations and deal with people and spot trouble. So I think the other solution is more training for staff in spotting issues and managing trouble.
And there's also the fact that, like the way you arrange the area where the crowd is if you herd them like cattle, then yes, you are accelerating the loss of civil type behaviors.